our Audubon Chapter board for, I think, 3 or 4 years now. And you'd never guess it because he's gotten enough work done to have accomplished, most people would accomplish in 20 years. He's accomplished in just 3. He's been a very advocate for his home country of Honduras, and Wilmer will be the host and facilitator for this evening's program. So Wilmer, please take us into this evening's program.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Keith. Very excited with this program. Like Keith mentioned, you know, the Audubon Chapter of Minneapolis has this important partnership with an organization in the neotropics in Honduras. And this is part of a program that I lead within the chapter that we call the Migration Partners Program. This is a partnership with the Honduran Ornithology Association, Aves Honduras, and with the Institute of Birds Population. We're focusing on supporting the research in Honduras with you know, participating in the funding for a MoSI station. A MoSI station, MoSI stands for Monitoring Over Winter Survival. And for us, you know, that are here, that live in Minnesota, you know, we have these big connections with the neotropics, of course, with almost, you know, we share with Honduras about 80 migratory bird species. And we feel that it's very important to engage the folks of Minnesota with and establish these partnerships with the folks in Honduras. So this evening, so we have 2 members of Aves Honduras, Rosel B. Juarez, who's a biologist at the Zamorano University, and also John Van Dor. They're both leading the efforts of the operation of the MoSI station in Honduras, and we will hear from them the progress and how that project has been working. As part of the efforts that we're doing here in Minnesota, we're starting a fundraising campaign this April through May to raise funds to keep the funding for that MoSI station. You will hear from, I'm sure, from Roselby and John a little bit of the history of that station and how important it is for them and for us here too to give some continuity to gather data about what's happening in Honduras with some of these bird species. So I encourage you to visit our website. We have a donate page there, and you can, you know, go in there and donate, and specifically for this Migration Partners Program. With that, I'll give the floor to Roselby and John to introduce themselves and to talk us through what's been happening there in Honduras. Thank you, Roselby, and welcome.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first, I would like to say thank you to the Audubon Chapter of Minneapolis for the opportunity to give this talk. And I would like to begin by mentioning that, as Wilmer mentioned, this monitoring in Uyuca is a collaboration between Aves Honduras and Zamorano University, specifically through the Centro Zamorano de Biodiversidad, or Biodiversity Zamorano Biodiversity Center. With the kind support from the chapter, the Minneapolis chapter of Audubon, and through the IVP, specifically through the MoSI program of IVP, or the Institute for Bird Populations. And okay. I would like to begin by mentioning a little bit about Honduras. So, and for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to visit Honduras, mentioning that Honduras is located at the northern part of Central America, and is the country covers an area from approximately 43,000 square miles, which is roughly the size of the Minnesota state. And basically the country is mostly mountains. 75% of the country is formed by mountains. And the Honduran country is basically has contact with the Caribbean Sea as well as the Pacific Ocean. And together, the coastline for the country is about 500 miles. The temperatures here in Honduras varies according to the season, as well as according to the elevation that you travel from. But it's basically between 4,500 Fahrenheit and 100 Fahrenheit. And we here have approximately 794 bird species that through the Aves Honduras, or the ASHO, the Ornithological Association, we are trying to protect and get to know a little bit better to be able to protect. I forgot to mention that I had been a member of the ASHO, or Aves Honduras, since 2010. We had been very active through these 10 years trying to get our, get some studies done, as well as to get people to know more about all the rich biodiversity, specifically rich avifauna that this country hosts. Well, here's a little bit more about the Uyuca, and specifically a closer look of the station per se. And as you can see, is located more or less in the center of the country. Is roughly about 9 miles from the Tegucigalpa, which is the capital city of Honduras, and is about more or less the same distance from Zamorano University, for those of you who had the privilege to visit the country and may know where Zamorano University is located regarding the capital city of Honduras. And this banding station is located at the Uyuca Biological Reserve, which has been protected officially by the Honduran government, or with a declaration from the Honduran government since 1985. But even before that, the first director of the Zamorano University was already very interested in protecting the Uyuca forest, because he realized how important this forest was regarding to all benefits that provide the surrounding communities, the approximately 10 communities or 10 neighborhoods around the reserve. So since 1948, Wilson Popenoe was the first one to buy those lands that are now part of the reserve, and declare that those forests must be protected, not just because of the birds, but also because they provide water for approximately 10 communities around the reserve. And well, the reserve itself is relatively small. It's only 237 hectares, but it also is surrounded by a buffer zone of 580 hectares. And the habitats that they protect is mostly pine oak and cloud forest, very well developed pine oak forest, as you can see in this image right here in the PowerPoint. And also pure pine forests are in the lower part of the hill. Okay. I forgot to mention, but this reserve has been since basically since 1986. It had been under the protection, on the Honduran government protection, but it is, at the end of the day, it is Zamorano University who is in charge of the protection of the reserve itself, and specifically through the Department of Environmental and Development at Zamorano University. So, okay, the habitats of the biological reserve are basically, as I mentioned before, is pine oak forest, very dense pine oak forest with a lot of bryophytes because of the reserve is very humid, or it rains very, for the most part of the year. There is some rain at the place. And as you can also see in the photo, the understory of the reserve is very well developed. And that is specifically the habitat that you see here in this photo is specifically the kind of habitat where the bird banding site at Uyuca is surrounded around the mist-nets. In terms of the elevations, basically it goes from the reserve, the nuclear, the main part of the reserve is between 100 and 700 meters above sea level to more than 2,000 meters above sea level, which is the highest peak of the Uyuca hill that is protected under this reserve. And here at this specific location, we had established this MoSI bird banding station under the program led by the Institute for Bird Populations in the US. And as Wilmer mentioned before, MoSI stands, or is the acronym for the Monitoreo de Sobrevivencia Invernal, which is roughly translated as monitoring over winter survival according to IVP. And this bird banding site at Uyuca is one of the many bird banding stations that are MoSI stations that are located through all the Latin American countries, including Peru, as you can see here, as far south as Peru, as you can see here in this map that is available through IVP. And also another important aspect that I would like to highlight about the Uyuca bird banding site is that it's the only MoSI station in the whole set of MoSI stations, more than 80 MoSI stations, is the only station in the Pine Knot ecoregion, as well as in the highland of Central America, which is one of the main units that IDP has categorized as the main biological ecoregions to work through. And even though this highland of Central America, or the Pine Oak ecoregion, as also is called, extends from South Mexico all the way through Guatemala and Honduras, through the highlands of Guatemala and Honduras, and a little bit Nicaragua. This, the MoSI program runs basically from November through March, and it's a complementary program to the MAX program that most of you are probably familiar with. And so these two programs complement each other, and with the idea to better understand specifically the neotropical migrants, because as you may all know, many of these species are declining, including this one, for example, swinson thrush, which is one of the focal species. Many of the neotropical species are declining. So one of the main goals of these two projects are basically to get enough information that allow us to guide the management and conservation efforts orientated to all neotropical migratory bird species. Okay, at Uyuca, as any other bird banding station that are part of the MoSI program, we follow the MoSI protocol, which consists of setting out 16 misnets. In the image, you can see the setting of the 16 misnets at Uyuca Reserve. And you can also see that they are basically located between the 1,600 and 1,700 meters above sea level, the set of 16 misnets that we had at Uyuca. And anyway, these samples for the MoSI program are collected every month during 3 days. During 3 days of field work, and every day until we basically complement 25 hours of mist netting for each month. And as I mentioned before, the program runs from November through March to complement the other monitoring programs that are carried out in the US. And after we capture birds in the mist net, we are checking the mistnet every hour to extract the birds, and then they are taken to the bird banding place where each bird gets a band. In the case of the migratory birds, we use metal bands provided by the bird banding lab in the US. But in the case of resident birds, as these Catarus France, Fruticard nightingale thrush that you have here in the image, you see that the resident birds are given us a plastic color band with a unique number as well as the migratory species, with the idea that we can identify every individual that is recaptured, and we get to know more information about this bird. Once that the birds are banded, we basically proceed to collect a series of biometrical data, starting with the most important data, which is age and sex, followed by the reproductive status, body condition, mold limits, wind, and mass. And once that the bird had been banded and all the information has been collected, they are released close by to the bird banding site. And all this data are shared with with IVP through their website, or are submitted following the instructions that are in their website. Those data are submitted to Stephen Albert actually directly, together with other data related to effort, as well as the summary of the captures. And beside the information of the birds in the hand, we also keep a survey list, and John will be talking about more of this later on. And we basically just finished the first MoSI season, which ran from November through March of 2022. And we had basically a very, very exciting field season. We caught a lot of resident birds like these two that you can see in this image, which is basically a mountain trogon and a green-breasted mountain jay, a hummingbird, which is quite common, and is the hummingbird that you also saw in the first slide that I showed. But we also had the opportunity to catch many jewels like this one that I am showing here, like Wilson's warbler, wood thrush, and golden winged warbler. And John will continue talking about more of our results. So thank you very much for your attention, and I will be here delighted to answer any questions that you may have.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for connecting. I will now be, and thanks Roselvi for that introduction. So everybody knows where exactly is Uyuca and how do we run that banding station. I want to take this opportunity to explain a little bit about the first 5 months of the banding pulse. We started last November and we just finished our 5th pulse. That means the end of the first MoSI season, pardon. And just run you through that quickly. And start out with a little bit of background. This banding site, we did banding pulses between 2010 and 2012. Monthly pulses of 25 hours each for 12 months of the year. So 10 years later, we're basically starting this program where we left off 10 years ago. In those first 3 years, we had over 4,000 captures there. That includes recaptures. Now we've started again in November 21, and the goal is to repeat this study for at least 3 years and potentially longer. It's open-ended at this point. And we have a current team that consists of 2 banders, Roselvi and myself, and also a botanist, who you can see in the top left picture. In the middle, that is Rina Diaz. You can see in these photos also some impressions from banding sites in Uyuca. I'll start out with some research interests that we have here at this site, basically based on the first 3 years of monitoring. This site is characterized by large numbers of hummingbirds, which has to do with the well-developed understory, as Roselvi mentioned. Here in the lower left corner, you can see capture rates of 3 common species there. And this is 3 years in a row. And you can clearly see that there's a seasonal pattern there. Especially azure-crowned hummingbird and white-eared hummingbird. Every year they peaked in April, May. Capture rates go up dramatically and then drop down to very low the rest of the year. Whereas the blue species, green-breasted mountain gem, seems to be more common throughout the year, but also has peaks. And based on this seasonality and peaks and lows in our capture rates, we were interested in exploring more this relationship between our captures and the resource availability. And that is how we started a partnership or work together with a botanist who is also an employee just as we are at the Zamorano Biodiversity Center. And she's seen here in this photo, well, it looks like she's looking at birds, but she's actually counting flowers in trees and in shrubs. And that way she's quantifying the available resources for hummingbirds in our study area. And we hope to publish these results, these findings, and link our capture rates to the data that she is collecting. Another research interest that we have is within this hummingbird group, one specific hummingbird, the green-breasted mountain gem. It's near endemic here in Honduras. It goes into a little bit into Nicaragua, but it's mostly Honduras. And we are located right in the middle of its range. It is one of our most frequent captures. And so we have actually an excellent opportunity to study this bird. So we are collecting data on the breeding phenology. We can deduce that from our captures. At some point, a lot of immatures are entering our nets, and the adults are starting to molt, as you can see in the lower right corner. They do that when the breeding season is over. So while we are collecting all these data, we're able to get an idea of their life history. We're also studying their song, and we're even outside the banding. We're also doing every month transects, where we collect numbers of abundance, not only of this species, actually of all the species. And we also keep track of how many birds are singing. So at the end of the year, we will know which time of the year they sing, how often they sing, etc. Let's talk a little bit about the season the first MoSI season that we just finished. Over these 5 pulses, we had 630 captures. 67 of those were of neotropical migrants, representing 11% of our captures, and that's divided over 12 species. But the majority are resident species. We captured in these 5 months 31 species for a total of 565 captures, including recaptures. The migrants, I want to focus first on the migrants. One of them was the Sharpshoot Hog. We caught this individual twice, first in December when we put a ban on it, and then we caught it again in February. As you can see, it's a bird in its first year, but as most of you will know, the Sharpshoot Hog develops from yellow eyes to red eyes in the adult plumage. And you can actually see that even in the course of these 2 months, December to February, you can already perceive a little bit of color change in the color of the iris, of the iridis of this bird. Hopefully it is now on its way back to perhaps Minnesota or somewhere in the United States. But it clearly it wintered in our study site in Uyuca. Another bird of the neotropical migrants is blue-headed vireo. We only had 1 capture this season, and in the previous 3 years, 10 years ago, we had 7 captures. So it's not a frequent capture, but it's a bird that is generally there. We almost always observe it, usually in the treetops. So it tends to be a little bit higher than where the nets are. Honduras is not super important for them based on eBird data. It has been modeled by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology that about 4% of their winter population is found in Honduras, which we're kind of at the end of their southern end of their winter range. Swainson's thrush, we had lots of captures, surprisingly large amount of captures in our first 5 months, namely 22. If you compare that with the first 3 years, we ever had 33 captures. So something seems to be going on there. You also notice it when you walk around. Generally birding, you hear them more often. It used to be not such a common or commonly detected bird in Uyuca as it is now. It winters widely in the neotropics, all the way down to northern Argentina. And Honduras only takes up 3% of the population, the wintering population. Wood thrush is another bird that we caught it 4 times in the first 5 months. If you compare that to only 9 captures in the first 3 years, it seems like that also appears to be increasing. Honduras here is much more important for this species because 21% of the total population winters in Honduras, according to the eBird models. And another thrush, the catbird, the gray catbird, we had 5 captures, including 3 recaptures. In the first 5 months, if you compare that to only 2 captures in the first 3 years, that seems to be increasing. Honduras is not that important for them. Only 5% of the winter population visits the country. And Baltimore Oriole, 1 capture so far. We had never caught it before, so this is our first and only capture so far. 18% of this bird winters in Honduras. Golden winged warbler. Here we get to a bird that we really share with folks in Minnesota, because Minnesota is extremely important as a breeding habitat and our breeding range. And Honduras is very important in the winter range. There's no other country that hosts as many wintering golden winged warblers as Honduras, 38% according to the Cornell models. The first 3 years, we only captured 5 times, but we already have 4 captures this time, including 2 recaptures. So these 2 birds clearly wintered in the Uyuca Reserve and are probably now either leaving or somewhere in Mexico or on their way to Minnesota. Tennessee warbler, again, quite a few more captures now than we used to have 10 years ago. Already 9 captures in the first 5 months compared to 9 captures in the first 3 years. Honduras is quite important for this species also. 27% is modeled to winter here. And the worm-eating warbler, another of our neotropical migrant captures. So far only 1 capture, and even in 10 years ago, in the first 3 years, we didn't capture it that often, 7 captures. It's really more a bird of lower elevations. I guess we are a little too high in Uyuca for this bird, but so far 1. Ovenbird, that is again, same story, 10 captures already in the first 5 months compared to 13 captures in the first 3 years. So something seems to be going on with both with warblers and with thrushes, at least with the migrants. But not all of them. Wilson's warbler, 6 captures so far in the first 5 months compared to 34 earlier. But that seems more or less on track to what you would expect. And Honduras is it's a common bird in Honduras, but this is a very common species. And evidently Mexico is much more important than Honduras for this bird in winter. And our last neotropical migrant capture was rose-breasted grosbeak with 2 captures, compares to 6 captures in the first 3 years. And 11% of this bird winters is modeled to winter in Honduras. So looking at these preliminary results, some questions arise. You know, what's going on? Is Uyuca maybe drier than it was 10 years ago? It certainly seems like that to me. Did Uyuca maybe become more attractive to migratory thrushes and to the understory warblers? Is there maybe less available winter habitat for these migrants, and that's why they're flocking to Uyuca? It's of course very difficult to say, and it's pure speculation at this point, but it's interesting to see these trends not only in 1 or 2 species, but in multiple species. And another thing to wonder about, what about the resident thrushes and warblers? Are they also increasing? Or are they staying the same or competing, or what's going on? Let's take a look at these residents. We captured 31 species in the first 5 months. As you will understand, lots of hummingbirds. That's always been the case. It was the same 10 years ago. They are not our most common capture. Our most common capture is actually a tanager. And there's even a few residents that we share with the folks in Minneapolis, as you will see later on. Our most frequent capture is the common Chloris pingus. So far we've captured 180 captures. That includes the recapture, so it's not 180 individuals. And in the first 3 years, we got to almost 1,000 captures, including recaptures. So they are very common in Uyuca. They seem to be doing very well there. And it's a bird that we are collecting a ton of data of. This is a highland species. It's found from Mexico all the way to northern Argentina, in South America along the Andes, and in Central America, Middle America. It's really a highland species, very common in the appropriate habitat. Now here's the green-breasted mountain gem mentioned before. We have already had 172 captures in the first 5 months, and in the first 3 years, 905 captures. So we are really, very well positioned to study this bird, and that's exactly what we're doing. Azure ground hummingbird, another frequent capture. So far, 32 captures in the first 5 months, but as you may remember from an earlier slide, the peak in this species is probably still to come, because the first 3 years it was always in April, May. So later this month and next month, we expect to capture many azure ground hummingbirds. It's a highland species for the most part, although there's also a lowland population in eastern Honduras and even in Belize. But in Honduras, it's mostly a highland species. Riverleaf hummingbird, that's certainly a highland species. Some of you may remember the old name, magnificent hummingbird. Found from Mexico or southwestern US, basically, to Honduras and northwestern Nicaragua. This individual here is a juvenile. You can tell from the light feather edges throughout the upper parts. The adults don't have that. So far, we've captured 17, and in the first 3 years, we got to 73 captures. Mexican violet deer, another hummer, less common than the other ones in Uyuca, but so far 2 captures, and compared to 32 captures in the first 3 years. Also a highland species. Violet saberwing, that was a surprise, a real surprise, because that had never been caught in Uyuca in the first 3 years, nor had it ever been seen. And Uyuca is birded, quite frequently. So this was, it's a species that is more common in middle elevation, humid forest. And in Honduras is not rare on the Atlantic slope, but Uyuca is on the Pacific slope, and kind of a surprise to find it there. A very large and colorful hummer. This was also a little bit of a surprise, and also without previous captures. This is a very, very small species. It's not that rare, but maybe the reason why we don't capture it more often could be just the size, because this thing is so small that the mesh of our nets is probably too big for it, and some of them may fly straight through. This particular individual is a male, and it seemed like it had some bill deformity. As you can see, the upper mandible seems to be deformed, but all the same, the bird seemed to be fine, and we released it as is. This is a kind of an honorary hummingbird. It's not really a hummingbird, obviously, but it feeds on nectar just like the hummingbirds do. It doesn't hover in front of flowers, but it just perches right next to them, and with that specially designed bill with that hook at the tip there, it just bores a little hole in the base of the flower, and that way it gets at the nectar. Since there are so many flowers in Uyuca, this species is also not rare. The first 3 years we had 97 captures of them, and thus far this season 8 captures so far. Looking at the resident thrushes, That's interesting. 10 captures so far in the first 5 months. Compare that to 3 captures in the first 3 years. This is another thrush, this one a resident, that also seems to be increasing in Uyuca. Honduras is fairly important for this species. It's a very common species, also in many disturbed habitats. You can find this in large cities. In fact, it's the bird that the birding group in San Pedro Sula, the second largest city in Honduras, has chosen as their emblem bird. And it's really very common in that city. Verticapped nightingale thrush, another thrush resident species. That one so far has not really increased because we've only caught it 4 times this MoSI season, and compared to 252 captures in the first 3 years, it doesn't seem like that much. Same thing goes for black thrush, also a resident thrush. These are frugivores, fruit eaters that I seem to remember from the first 3 years that their captures are a little bit like the hummingbirds, that they are not flat capture rates throughout the year, but really peak in the rainy season, if I remember correctly, when many berries become available, and probably some of them come down the mountain to where the banding site is. So it could be that later in the year, I expect in July and August, we may be catching a lot more of these resident thrushes. And we also have our own blue jay, except mostly black, blue on top. This is a juvenile. This is a regional endemic from Guatemala to northern El Salvador, Honduras, and a little bit into Nicaragua. Pine oak endemic. So far, only 1 capture, and the first 3 years we caught 9. This is a very colorful resident, the flame-colored tanager, also just 1 capture so far, and 8 captures in the first 3 years. So it's a bird that is really more often heard than seen, and it's kind of a denizen of the treetops. So it's common at the study site, but it doesn't always come down to where the nets are. A bird that is more common in the understory, perhaps, is blue and white mockingbird. Very handsome mockingbird, also a beautiful singer, by the way. So far, we've had 1 capture and 12 captures in the first 3 years. And also a regional endemic, as you can see, from southern Mexico to into Honduras. Blue bunting, another attractive resident bird. So far, 1 capture. We have caught it before 6 times in the first 3 years. That's kind of a surprise, really, because this is more of a lower elevation bird. So as you can see in the map, it's common in the Yucatan Peninsula and also in Western Mexico. Not so much in Honduras. So what is it doing in Uyuca at 1,700 meters above sea level? Kind of wonders. Not clear to us what it is doing there, but a little bit of a surprise. Here's one bird that we share with folks in Minnesota, the hairy woodpecker. Although you may not immediately recognize it, it looks quite different. This is the Central American subspecies, which is much darker than the ones in North America, and also different than the hairy woodpeckers in North America. Here it becomes really a specialist of the highlands. So it's not a generalist as it is in most of North America. It becomes a highland bird. So far, only 1 capture and 6 captures in the first 3 years. This was a really interesting capture for us. The bird is maybe not that beautiful to look at, but this is a rare species. So it was really interesting capture for us, and during the last polls a couple of weeks ago. We had caught it before once in Uyuca in 2012, but since then it had been seen, I think, once or twice in Honduras in 2014, but no records. So there's only like a few captures. A few birds were collected in the 30s and a handful of site records, but this is a really unknown species. It's a bamboo specialist that apparently occurs in Uyuca. Really notable capture. I'm going to close out with a non-bird, the Lenca leopard frog. This is an endemic to Honduras, which was only recently described in 2018. And you may have seen a pond in the background of some of our photos. This frog is present there. And we sometimes get researchers to visit from other countries, specifically looking for this frog. Speaking of visits, we recently had a visit of a group of Honduran court judges and lawyers to the banding station. And here Rosalvi is explaining to them the ins and outs of our banding operation. These people are taking a course at Samarana University on the intersection between law and biodiversity, which will help them treat biodiversity crime or misdemeanors in a better way, and helps them to understand the many challenges that law also faces concerning biodiversity. And I'd like to take this opportunity to also extend a welcome to our audience in Minnesota or Minneapolis to perhaps come and visit us also. You are all very welcome. And that rounds out my part of the presentation. I will be available also, just as Rosalvi, to address some questions that you may have. And for now, I will hand it back to Wilmer. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for that presentation. Great pictures and wow, a lot of detail there. A lot of work. You both were very busy this last 5 months, huh? With all the work there at the station. Yeah, if anybody has questions, please you can type the questions on the chat. I'm gonna take a few minutes here just to give you an overview of what Aves Honduras has been doing this last few years. We were gonna have the president of Aves Honduras, but he wasn't available. But I have a few slides here that he shared with me that I like to share with you. Let me know here. I'm gonna. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Yes, good. So, yeah, like I said, this partnership is with, Aves Honduras, and, they've been doing a lot of great work there in all the efforts of conservation and education. Oliver Comar is the current president, and Isis Castro is the vice president. Oliver is the co-author of the Peterson Field Guide to Birds of North Central America. That's a good guide for birds of that region. He's currently a professor of ecology at Zamorano University. And Isis Castro, she's also a member of Aves Honduras and is the general manager of Choose Honduras, a local operator of international birding tours. In fact, Isis just hosted a couple from Minnesota that was there doing a birding tour in Honduras. We'll hear more about Greg Severson's trip to Honduras when he gets back. So the Honduran Ornithology Association is relatively, fairly new. It was founded in 2010, So 12 years old organization. They got over 150 members. One of the important pieces that I like always to highlight is this. They have 14 affiliated birding clubs there. And there's a lot of young people getting involved in birding in Honduras currently. So these are the areas that, in the strategic plan that they put together, these are the areas they're gonna be focusing on: research, conservation, education, supporting the birding tourism, the aviatourism, grow as an institution with some institutional development, and put more time in communications. They just changed their new logo. This is a wonderful, colorful logo that now they have. So these are some highlights of the projects that they want to do. In the research program, they have these 7 different projects. They're gonna try to do some crowdfunding through their website. Supporting the Honduran Ornithology student. There's a migratory shorebird project that they're partnering with a group in Colombia. There's a Central American waterbird census through a partnership with Manomet. Same thing they're doing with this shrimp farming best practices. And of course, the project that we support, the MoSI station, is part of that research efforts. There's also a neotropical flyway project with another organization from Colombia, and they're promoting, citizen science. The use of eBird is very, eBird is widely used by a lot of the birders in Honduras, as well as iNaturalist. In the area of conservation, you saw there the visit that they had of some lawyers that were studying at Zamorano University. They also are working with BirdLife International in important birding areas, mapping and validation. That's an important project for Honduras. There's also working on developing a network of private bird sanctuaries. Like a lot of folks know that, conservation, there is a big participation of private citizens on those efforts, and those are important. There's also a project in the eastern part of the country, in the Olancho area, in partnership with the American Bird Conservancy. In education, they're always doing a lot of workshops. During this, almost 2 years of COVID, I remember that in 2020 they did a lot of work through this type of media. Doing Zoom meetings and stuff, and those type of workshops. So they've been doing a lot of good work, getting folks from different universities and different high schools and even elementary schools involved. In fact, the Minneapolis Public School is going to be doing a conference sharing with students at one of the schools in Zamorano. So that's part of our Migration Partners Program efforts that we're trying to make that work, to do some sharing between students of Minneapolis and students of Zamorano from one of the elementary schools there. And also they're promoting and supporting the birding tourism. So they getting folks involved with partnership with the Honduran Institute of Tourism. They're always participating on the global big days, all these different large events, trying to get more people involved in birding. And they're trying to strengthen the organization. They're planning, looking at maybe having, right now it's a volunteer-run organization. They're trying to through through partnership with BirdLife International to actually have a permanent, executive director. So those are in the plans for this year. And they're doing a lot of work. Like I said, they have changed their website, they're changing their logo. And so they're, improving their tools through, to reach out more people using their websites and all the social media. Okay, I think that's my last slide. Thank you for joining. I'm gonna take a look here at the questions, and I don't know if Katie has a better way to field some of the questions, but let me see if I can do this.
Wilmer, if you would like me to, we can read through the chat questions for you.
Okay.
And then have guests or have our guest speakers answer live. One moment while I bring those up for us.
Yes.
Okay, so first question, do you have information about how the flora of Uyuca has changed since the last set of MoSI pulses?
Yeah, I can address that question. We don't have any specific question. We are certainly collecting a lot more flora information now than we were 10 years ago. That's for sure. But having said that, Uyuca has always been a research station operated by Zamorano, and we are not the only ones doing research there. So it may very well be that there is information from 10 years ago that about flora that we can use.
Thank you. Additional question, do you have many species that migrate vertically by season, probably pursuing different food resources?
Yes, that is probably true. And maybe a good example would be the mountain Elenia, which is, I think we caught 1 or 2 so far, the first 5 months. But I expect it will be a very frequent capture in July or August, because that is technically a flycatcher, but it's really a fruit eater. So once fruits become very abundant in around the mist nets, those birds probably come down a little bit from the mountain to take opportunity of that southern food bonanza, and we capture them. And then a few months later, their capture rates goes down again, and they're gone. But that happens every year, so they are probably an altitudinal migrant at the site.
Thank you. And on the note of food resources, the next question is, are insect numbers changing during the study period? Has your area been hit by avian influenza? So it's a two-part.
Yeah, I don't know that. That's a tough one to answer. I don't know if the insect numbers are changing here. We ourselves are not measuring it, so we don't know that. An avian flu, I have not heard of any cases here, to be honest.
Yeah, I think here we're largely seeing, the occurrence in the numbers following the influx of migratory waterfowl, and then seeing that hop to a number of other species that are being impacted. So gulls, poultry here are already being impacted. So we're seeing it in raptors as well. And so it's something that is in the news and also a topic of great concern and interest throughout our region, throughout the country, actually.
Right.
Next question, will the Uyuca MoSI pulses continue now until next November?
Yes. yeah, the MoSI season is over, but our work is not over. We will be there again later this month, and again next month. So we continue to do these monthly pulses.
Very good. Next question. Can you estimate whether some of the species you catch are undergoing range expansion? Are some populations increasing, or are you seeing only decreases?
Yeah, that's difficult to say. We saw some local, what looks like local increases, but you know, that's just on one site, and it's also based on very little data so far. So that's not really a question that we can answer based on the Uyuca data alone. However, we do submit our data to bird populations, the Institute of Bird Populations, which has this whole network of monitoring sites. And together, I think, if you take the bigger picture, we will be able to answer that question more thoroughly.
Thank you. Next question. Do you use birdsong recordings to draw birds into the mist nets?
No, we do not. What we do is called passive mist netting, where you set up a series of mist nets, and that all MoSI stations do that. None work with lures. But some researchers who are studying a particular species may use active mist netting, where you set up a mist net and you play that bird's song with the intent to get it in the mist net. And then immediately you stop recording, or you stop doing the playback. You get your information from your bird, you probably band it, and then you usually take down the mist net. But that is not what we do. Our mist nets are open for 25 hours, spread over 3 days, and we do not do any playback of any kind.
Thank you. And the follow-up question also regarding the nets themselves, wondering if since 2012, have they changed at all? And I don't know if that is in reference to perhaps the design of them.
It's the same mist nets, and they are on almost the exact same locations. For many of them, they are in the exact same locations where they were in 2012. In a few cases, it was not possible to do that because a large tree had fallen down, or it just became impossible to put them on the exact same location. But they are certainly in the exact same general area where we mist netted 10 years ago. And as I said, many mist nets are in the exact same locations where they were 10 years ago.
Thank you. Next question is in regards to coffee growing. So in the highlands, is the growing of shade coffee something that is encouraged? And the second part of the question is, are most coffee farms grown in the sun?
I'm not sure if I know the answer to that. Roselva,
Definitely.
do you want to address that question, or?
Yes, of course. Yes, a coffee plantation in Honduras under shade is actually stimulated, as in many other countries in the region, as far as I am aware of it. And there are coffee plantations strictly without shade, but I think that Fabiola Rodriguez, who is also an ASHO member and is studying her PhD right now at the Tulane University. Thank you, Wilmer. She looked into more detail in that particular aspect, so she may have more information regarding how is the proportion of the coffee that is grown under shade versus sun coffee plantations. But no, definitely the shade coffee plantation is stimulated, and indeed is part of the habitat for the natural habitat that is being lost for birds is actually lost to coffee plantation. But how good is, what is the relation with the species in particular? I will not be able to answer.
Thank you. And the final question is inquiring on sort of the state and the quality of the habitat around and outside of the reserve area. Has it experienced a lot of change? Has it remained kind of constant? What does that look like? So thinking about that larger picture, you know, outside of the boundaries of the reserve.
Yeah. As in many other parts of the neotropics, I've seen, and even at a global scale, habitat loss is one of the main threats to biodiversity, not only to birds, but to biodiversity in general. And of course, Honduras is not the exception. And if we reduce more that to Francisco Morazán, to the department Francisco Morazán and the Distrito Central, which is the geographical area where the Uyuca Reserve is located, is not the exception. We have lost habitat due to mainly to urbanizations. Tegucigalpa city is expanding in almost any direction that you can imagine, and since the reserve is only 8 to 9 miles away from the main city in Honduras, well, yes, we are losing habitat mainly due to urbanization, but also due to agricultural, mainly to growth. Corn and beans, which are basically the foundation of the feeding here in Honduras, to the main grains that we consume here in Honduras, basically.
Thank you. That is it for our questions. I think, Wilmer, if you'd like to say a few final words to kind of round us out, but I just want to say thank you to you both for just an excellent program. He's also shared that this is a very helpful presentation, and we're just so grateful for all the work that you do and for taking the extra time to share it with all of us and our membership this evening. This is most excellent.
Yeah, definitely. John and Roselby, thank you very much for taking the time, and it's wonderful presentations, great material. Like I said before, you know, our chapter will be launching this fundraising campaign. You know, from our membership here, you know, we really appreciate all the work you do there in Honduras. You know, this is not just, you know, important for the research, but also, you know, for the communities that surround Uyuca and all this, the student body at the University of Zamorano University, and people here, you know, really appreciate the work that you do, and definitely this material will help us to promote our work with the Migration Partners Program and the partnership with Aves Honduras. So thank you. Muchísimas gracias por todo el trabajo que están haciendo ahí. Thank you very much.
We certainly want to thank Minneapolis Audubon for the support that you have shown. So that's very welcome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and we will post a specific material on our website for the folks, the attendees on this meeting, or if you're gonna be watching this in our recording, you know, we will have a specific place in our website that you can come into the Audubon Chapter of Minneapolis site, Minneapolis.audubon.org, and you can make the donation specifically for the Migration Partners Program. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us, and have a great evening. Y hasta luego. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank
nice
you.
to see you all. And
Yeah,
thank
nice
you for all
see
the
you.
support.
Bye-bye.
Bye.